Hello, beautiful people. You've just landed on Dark Harry. Today's featured story is What If Harry Brought Lurch to the Battle of Hogwarts. Death Eaters ran away. If you're new here, welcome to the family. Hit subscribe and the notification bell. And if you're returning, you know the drill, like and share. Enough talk, let's get into the story. Chapter 1, The Family Connection. Harry bolted upright in his sleeping bag, gasping for air. The canvas of the tent flapped gently in the night breeze while Ron's snores filled the darkness. For the third night in a row, the same dream had jolted him awake, a massive, stone mansion perched on a hill, inhabited by the strangest family he'd ever imagined. Harry? Hermione's voice came from her bunk, tired but alert. Another nightmare? Not exactly. Harry fumbled for his glasses. It's different from the visions about Voldemort. More like memories. But they can't be mine. Hermione was already lighting her wand. Tell me. There's this house, massive, gothic, looks half-haunted. And inside, this family, they're wizards, but nothing like any I've seen. And there's this butler, this enormous man they call Lurch. He barely speaks, but in the dream, he keeps looking at me like he's waiting for something. Ron stirred from his bunk. Mate, we've been camping in this bloody tent for weeks. Your brain's probably just making up stories for entertainment. Maybe. Harry rubbed his scar, though it wasn't hurting. But it feels important. Like I'm supposed to find these people. Hermione was already reaching for her beaded bag. What did they call themselves in the dream? The Adams, Harry replied, the name feeling strangely familiar on his tongue. The Adams family. Hermione's eyebrows shot up. She yanked a worn leather journal from her bag, flipping pages frantically. I knew that sounded familiar. Look at this, I found it among the books Dumbledore left me. She handed Harry the journal. On the page was a family tree, branching out from a central name, Evans. His mother's maiden name. One branch extended far to the left, crossing the Atlantic Ocean drawn on the page, ending with a name that made Harry's heart skip, Adams. Bloody hell, Ron breathed, peering over Harry's shoulder. You've got family in America? Distant cousins, by the look of it, Hermione explained. Your grandmother's cousin married into the Adams family. They're an ancient magical lineage, but they practice different magic. Different how? Harry asked. Old magic. Pre-wand. Some say darker, but really just different traditions. Hermione hesitated. They've largely kept to themselves, especially since the International Statute of Secrecy. They don't exactly blend in. Harry stared at the family tree. Why would I be dreaming about relatives I never knew existed? Blood calls to blood, Ron said quietly. When they both looked at him in surprise, he shrugged. What? My mum says it all the time. Family magic can reach across distances, especially in times of need. Harry looked at the Horcrux locket sitting on the table, then at the sword of Gryffindor they'd recently acquired. We've destroyed one Horcrux, but we're still nowhere with the others. Maybe this is Dumbledore's way of pointing me toward help. You think Dumbledore knew about your American relatives? Ron asked skeptically. Dumbledore knew everything, Harry replied. And he always had backup plans. Hermione bit her lip. It's risky. International travel during a wizarding war. We'd be exposing ourselves. We're exposed everywhere, Harry countered. The Snatchers nearly had us last week. We're running out of options, Hermione. And if these people are family, then they might help, she finished. But how would we even get to America? Ron snorted. You two always forget I grew up in the wizarding world. International port keys. Bill set one up when he was dating that American witch before Fleur. Dad said they're regulated, but the ministry's fallen, Harry finished, a plan already forming. We find a wizard with international connections, convince them to help. Or confund them, Hermione added pragmatically. I'm not proud of it, but we're at war. Harry felt something he hadn't in months, a sense of direction. We leave tomorrow. Find someone who can create a portkey. I need to meet this family. 3 days, 2 close calls with Snatchers, and 1 successful Confundus charm on an international magical transportation officer later, the trio stumbled onto American soil. The portkey, an old baseball, had deposited them at the edge of a cemetery that seemed to stretch for miles in every direction. Charming location, Ron muttered, dusting himself off. Your relatives couldn't live next to a beach. According to the coordinates in the journal, the house should be. Hermione turned slowly, orienting herself, then pointed toward a hill in the distance. There. Even from this distance, Harry could see it was exactly as it had appeared in his dreams, a massive Victorian mansion that looked like it had been designed by someone with a particular fondness for gargoyles, spires, and the general aesthetic of elegant decay. That's it, he whispered. That's the house from my dreams. They approached cautiously, walking through the cemetery where many of the graves bore the name Adams. As they reached the wrought iron gates, they swung open on their own with an ominous creak. Well, that's not creepy at all, Ron muttered. A path cleared itself through the overgrown yard, dead vines pulling aside like curtains. Harry led the way, his wand ready but not raised. Something told him they weren't in danger, at least not the kind of danger they were used to. They were halfway to the front door when it swung open. Silhouetted in the doorway was an enormous figure, easily 7 feet tall with broad shoulders and a pallid, square face. He wore a formal butler's outfit that seemed a century out of date. That's him, Harry breathed. That's Lurch. The massive butler's eyes widened slightly at the sight of Harry. He raised one enormous hand and beckoned. Youth, he groaned, the sound somewhere between a greeting and a foghorn. Should we follow him? Hermione whispered, her hand tight around her wand. Before Harry could answer, a woman's voice rang out from inside the house. Lurch, darling, who's at the door? Is it the census taker? Tell him we've already donated his predecessor to Things collection. A woman glided into view beside Lurch, tall, impossibly slender, with skin pale as moonlight and hair black as night that fell to her waist. She wore a dress that clung to her like a second skin and tapered to tentacles around her feet. Her eyes widened at the sight of Harry. My word, she breathed. Those eyes. Gomez. Come quickly. I believe Lily's boy has found his way home. Harry felt his heart stutter. You knew my mother. The woman swept down the steps with impossible grace, reaching out with long, elegant fingers to touch Harry's face. Not personally, darling, but family is family. I'm Morticia Adams. Your grandmother's cousin was my husband's great-aunt on the front side. She said this as if it explained everything perfectly. We've been waiting for you to find us. You have? Harry asked, bewildered. Of course. The dreams started coming through, didn't they? Blood calls to blood, especially in dire times. She looked past him to Ron and Hermione. And you've brought friends. How delightful. We so rarely have guests who arrive voluntarily. A man bounded out of the house with the energy of a caffeinated acrobat. He wore a pinstriped suit and sported a pencil mustache, his hair slicked back with something that smelled faintly of bat guano. Harry Potter, he exclaimed, pumping Harry's hand vigorously. Gomez Adams. Your mother was a vision when she visited as a child. Those Evans eyes. And that talent for hexing. She turned cousin Itt completely purple for a week. He laughed uproariously at the memory. My mother visited here? Harry asked, struggling to keep up. Just once, when she was very small, Morticia explained. Before she went to Hogwarts. Your grandparents were uncomfortable with our side of the family. But blood is blood, and magic recognizes its own. Especially in times of need. Gomez added cheerfully. And judging by those haunted expressions and the fact you're carrying enough defensive enchantments to ward off a ghoul convention, I'd say need is precisely what brings you here. Harry glanced at Ron and Hermione, who looked as overwhelmed as he felt. We're in the middle of a war. In Britain. A dark wizard, Voldemort, Gomez nodded solemnly. Yes, we've heard whispers. Nasty business. No sense of style or panache in his darkness. Just cruelty for cruelty's sake. No appreciation for the artistry of the macabre. Morticia sighed dramatically. So disappointing when dark wizards have no aesthetic sensibility. Harry blinked rapidly. You're not afraid to say his name? Gomez barked a laugh. My dear boy, we're Adamses. We welcome fear, we dance with danger, we have death over for bridge on Thursdays. He clapped Harry on the shoulder. Besides, any taboo magic stops at the property line. Family protections. Very old, very powerful. Lurch made another low groaning sound from the doorway. Ah, Lurch is right, Morticia said, as if she'd understood perfectly. Where are our manners? Please, come inside. You must be exhausted from your journey. As they followed the strange couple into the mansion, Harry felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense of coming home. Not like Hogwarts, which had been his first true home, but something deeper, something in his blood that recognized these people, strange as they were. The interior of the mansion was exactly as he'd seen in his dreams, Gothic splendor mixed with bizarre curiosities. Swords adorned the walls alongside what appeared to be medieval torture devices displayed with the same reverence Aunt Petunia reserved for her china. A stuffed bear stood in one corner, wearing a ballerina outfit. A disembodied hand scuttled across the floor, pausing to give them a welcoming wave before disappearing into a mousehole. Was that, Hermione began. Thing, Morticia explained. A family friend. He's shy with new people. They were led to a sitting room where a fire burned with an unnatural green flame. Two children appeared as if from nowhere, a girl with long black braids and a solemn expression, and a round-faced boy who was clutching what appeared to be a headless doll. My children, Morticia introduced them. Wednesday and Pugsley. Wednesday fixed Harry with an unervingly intense stare. You have death following you, she said matter-of-factly. It's very becoming. Thanks. Harry replied. Pugsley grinned. Wanna see my collection of cursed objects? Maybe later, Ron answered quickly. Children, our guests have traveled far, Morticia gently admonished. They need refreshment. Lurch, would you bring the special tea? The one that doesn't cause immediate hallucinations? Lurch bowed solemnly. Youth. He shuffled away toward what Harry presumed was the kitchen. Gomez leaned forward eagerly. Now, tell us everything. What brings our long-lost relative across an ocean in the middle of a wizarding war? Harry exchanged glances with Ron and Hermione before diving into their story, the abbreviated version. He told them about Voldemort's return, about Dumbledore's death, about the Horcruxes, though not how many or where, and about their current desperate situation. Morticia and Gomez listened attentively, occasionally exchanging looks of approval at particularly dangerous moments in the tale. The children had settled at their feet, Wednesday whispering to her doll about various methods of beheading when Harry mentioned the snake Nagini. So we're hunting these objects, Harry concluded as Lurch returned with a tea service. But Voldemort's followers, Death Eaters, are hunting us. And they control the British Ministry of Magic now. Death Eaters, Gomez scoffed. Pretentious name. Death should be respected, not consumed. Morticia sipped her tea thoughtfully. This Dark Lord sounds terribly derivative. All that pure-blood nonsense. The Addams family has never concerned itself with blood purity, only blood loyalty. She reached out to stroke Harry's cheek again. And you, dear Harry, are blood. Which means your enemies are our enemies, Gomez declared, standing suddenly. The Addams family has stood against dark forces for centuries. Well, sometimes alongside them, depending on the century and how interesting their conversation was, but that's neither here nor there. Harry felt a surge of hope. Then you'll help us? Of course. Gomez exclaimed. What do you need? Cursed weapons. Ancient tomes of forgotten magic. A small army of the undead. Fester has been experimenting with reanimation again, though I should warn you they're not particularly reliable in combat situations. Tendency to drop limbs at inopportune moments. Actually, Hermione said carefully, we need information more than anything. These objects, Horcruxes, they're hidden. We need to find them, and we need to destroy them. Wednesday looked up from her doll. Horcruxes are child's play. Grandmama had a phase. Harry, Ron, and Hermione exchanged stunned looks. Your grandmother made Horcruxes? Harry asked incredulously. Morticia laughed, a sound like silk sliding over stone. No, darling. She studied them. The Addams Library contains texts on all manner of magic, especially the kinds your ministry pretends don't exist. We've preserved magical knowledge others tried to destroy, Gomez added proudly. Knowledge isn't dark, only intentions. Harry felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. For months, they'd been stumbling in the dark, relying on Hermione's remarkable but limited knowledge. Here was a family that might actually have answers. Could we see these books? Hermione asked, trying and failing to hide her excitement. Of course, Morticia rose gracefully. Lurch will show you to the library. But first, you must rest. You look exhausted, all of you. We've prepared rooms, the ones with the fewest carnivorous plants. As if on cue, Lurch appeared at the doorway. Harry was beginning to suspect the butler had some way of knowing when he was needed. Thank you, Harry said sincerely. This means more than you know. Family, Morticia said simply, as if that explained everything. And in a way, it did. Harry woke to sunlight filtering through heavy velvet curtains. For a moment, he couldn't remember where he was, the bed was soft, the sheets were clean, and for the first time in months, he'd slept without nightmares. Then it all came rushing back. The Addams family. His relatives. The promise of help. He dressed quickly in clean clothes that had been left for him, slightly old-fashioned but perfectly fitting, as if they'd been waiting in that wardrobe for years, just for him. Perhaps they had. When he entered the dining room, Ron and Hermione were already there, looking more rested than he'd seen them in months. Ron was enthusiastically devouring what appeared to be a normal breakfast, while Hermione was deep in conversation with an elderly woman Harry hadn't met the previous day. Harry. Ron called through a mouthful of eggs. You've got to try this food. First proper meal in ages. The elderly woman turned to Harry, her wild gray hair framing a face lined with years of mischievous living. So this is Lily's boy, she cackled, rising from her seat. I'm Grandmama. I knew your mother would make beautiful children. Those eyes. Like fresh pickled toads. Thank you, Harry said, accepting her bony embrace. Grandmama has been telling me about their family grimoire, Hermione said excitedly. They have information on Horcruxes I've never even heard mentioned. Including how to find them, Grandmama added with a wink. Blood calls to blood, and darkness calls to darkness. You can track Horcruxes? Harry asked incredulously. Not directly, she replied, stirring something that bubbled ominously in a cup. But we can track the magical signature of the Creator, if we have something of theirs. The connection is strongest between the Maker and their soul fragments. Harry's mind raced. We have the locket, it used to be a Horcrux before we destroyed it. Would that work? Grandmama's eyes lit up. Even better. A neutralized vessel still carries echoes of the magic that once inhabited it. Oh, this will be fun. I haven't done proper dark detection magic since the 60s. The 1760s, that is. Gomez burst into the room, followed by a bald man with wild eyes who appeared to have a light bulb in his mouth. The bulb was glowing. "Harry, my boy!" Gomez exclaimed. "Meet your Uncle Fester." Fester removed the light bulb with a pop. "Heard you're fighting a Dark Lord. Any chance for explosions?" "I specialize in explosions." "Fester," Morticia glided into the room, "let the children eat before you start discussing demolition techniques." Harry couldn't help but smile. These people were bizarre beyond measure, but there was something undeniably genuine about them. They accepted the strange and macabre as simply part of life, without fear or judgment. And strangely, he felt more at home here than he ever had at Privet Drive. After breakfast, they gathered in the library, an enormous room with books stacked from floor to ceiling, some chained to their shelves, others floating ominously above their heads. Grandmama spread the destroyed locket on a table covered in strange symbols. "Now, let's see what we can find." For the next several hours, they worked through ancient detection spells. Hermione absorbed everything like a sponge, taking copious notes and asking questions that made even Grandmama raise her eyebrows in appreciation. Ron proved surprisingly adept at handling the more temperamental magical ingredients, his experience with Fred and George's experiments coming in handy. By mid-afternoon, they had created a map of magical Britain with glowing points indicating magical signatures similar to the one from the locket. "There," Grandmama said triumphantly, pointing to a spot in Scotland. "Hogwarts. Something's there." "And here," Hermione pointed to a location in London. "That's got to be Gringotts." Harry stared at the map. "That's it. That's where we need to go next. Going up against goblins and a heavily fortified school." Fester cackled. "Now that's my kind of vacation." Gomez slapped Harry on the back. "A proper quest. Dangerous odds. Certain peril. I haven't been this excited since Morticia and I went hunting for the lost crown of Rasputin in the sewers of St. Petersburg." Wednesday appeared at Harry's elbow, making him jump. "You'll need protection," she said flatly. "Something they won't expect." "We've got the cloak, and our wands," Harry began, but Morticia was already shaking her head. "Your enemies know your methods, darling. You need something unexpected." Lurch, who had been standing silently in the corner, stepped forward. "You," he groaned, gesturing to himself. "Lurch!" Gomez exclaimed. "Brilliant. Why didn't I think of that?" Harry looked between them. "What's he saying?" "Lurch is offering to accompany you," Morticia explained. "He's very protective of family." Harry studied the towering butler. "That's very kind, but I couldn't ask you to." "You're not asking, he's offering," Wednesday interrupted. "And you should accept. Lurch is nearly indestructible." "Indestructible?" Ron repeated skeptically. Fester grinned maniacally. "Watch this." He pulled out what appeared to be a Muggle handgun and, before anyone could react, shot Lurch directly in the chest. Hermione screamed. Harry and Ron reached for their wands. But Lurch merely looked down at the bullet hole in his suit, reached inside with 2 fingers, and pulled out the flattened bullet. He dropped it into a small jar on a nearby shelf, which Harry now noticed contained dozens of similar bullets. "What the bloody hell?" Ron whispered. "Lurch isn't exactly alive in the conventional sense," Morticia explained delicately. "He's been with the family for centuries. No one quite remembers how he came to be, but he's impervious to most forms of damage." "And magic?" Harry asked, his mind racing with possibilities. "Most spells bounce right off," Gomez confirmed proudly. "Something about his particular constitution. Curses slide off him like water off a duck." Harry looked at Lurch with new appreciation. "And you'd be willing to come with us? To help fight Voldemort?" Lurch nodded solemnly and placed a massive hand on Harry's shoulder. "Family," he managed to articulate, the word clearly requiring tremendous effort. Something tightened in Harry's chest, a feeling of belonging he'd rarely experienced outside of his friendships with Ron and Hermione. Here was family, strange, macabre, possibly not entirely human family, but family nonetheless, willing to fight for him. "Thank you," he said simply. "Splendid." Gomez clapped his hands. "When do we leave?" "We?" Hermione asked nervously. "Well, naturally I'm coming too," Gomez declared. "A chance for adventure. Mortal peril. Dark wizards to duel." Morticia placed a gentle hand on her husband's arm. "Darling, remember what happened the last time you went to England? The Tower incident? The Queen's corgis?" Gomez's face fell. "You're right, cara mia. I'm still technically banned from British soil until 2057. He brightened. "But Lurch isn't. He can represent the family honor." Harry exchanged glances with Ron and Hermione. Having Lurch along would certainly change the dynamics of their mission, but was it a good idea? The massive butler would be impossible to hide, and stealth had been their primary advantage so far. But then again, they'd been hiding for months, and they were no closer to defeating Voldemort. Maybe it was time for a different approach. "Lurch," Harry said decisively, "we'd be honored to have your help. But I need to be clear, this is dangerous. Voldemort has an army, and they won't hesitate to try to kill you." Lurch's expression didn't change, but he made a dismissive noise and cracked his massive knuckles. "I believe that translates as, 'let them try,'" Morticia interpreted with a small smile. "When should we leave?" Hermione asked. "Tonight," Harry decided. "We've already been here longer than we should stay anywhere. The longer we wait, the more people die back home. Then we prepare," Gomez announced. "Lurch will need provisions. Fester, get the undetectable extension chest. Grandmama, your most potent protection potions. Wednesday, fetch the emergency weapons cache, the non-sentient one, we don't want a repeat of Bucharest." As the Adamses scattered to prepare, Harry pulled Ron and Hermione aside. "Are we sure about this?" he whispered. "Bringing Lurch?" "He seems handy," Ron offered. "And after seeing him take that bullet, I'm thinking he might be useful against Death Eaters." Hermione nodded slowly. Different magical cultures have different protections. The Death Eaters won't know what to make of him. That could give us an advantage. She bit her lip. "But Harry, we still need to be careful. We can't just charge into Hogwarts or Gringotts, even with Lurch's help." "No," Harry agreed. "But we need to move forward. We've been stuck for months, and now we have both locations and backup. It's time to take the fight to Voldemort." The preparations moved with surprising efficiency. By sunset, Lurch was packed and ready, wearing what appeared to be battle armor beneath his butler's suit. Glimpses of ancient metal peeked out from his collar and cuffs. The entire family gathered at the cemetery to see them off. The international port key, this time a decorative skull that Harry strongly suspected was real, was set to activate at midnight. "Remember," Grandmama instructed, handing Harry a small velvet pouch. "If you need to contact us, burn the black candle inside a circle of these herbs. Family magic will do the rest." Morticia embraced each of them in turn. "Take care of our Lurch," she told Harry. "And let him take care of you. He may not speak much, but he understands everything." Gomez pumped Harry's hand vigorously. "Give those Death Eaters a taste of Adam's hospitality. And when this is all over, you must come back for a proper visit. The swamps behind the house are lovely in summer, only mildly carnivorous." Wednesday handed Hermione a small, ancient-looking book. "Destruction Rituals," she said flatly. "For the soul fragments. Page 87 doesn't require a human sacrifice." Thanks," Hermione replied, carefully tucking the book away. As midnight approached, they gathered around the skull. Harry looked at his newfound family one last time, committing their strange, wonderful faces to memory. "Ready?" he asked Ron and Hermione, who nodded, and Lurch, who groaned affirmatively. Harry placed his finger on the skull, and the others followed suit. As the clock struck midnight, Harry felt the familiar hook behind his navel, and they were whisked away, back to Britain, back to war, but this time, with a powerful new ally. They landed hard in a field Harry recognized as the outskirts of Tinworth, not far from Bill and Fleur's cottage. The sudden change from the warm Adams mansion to the cold British spring made them all shiver, except Lurch, who seemed unaffected by the temperature. "We should get to Shell Cottage," Harry said, orienting himself. "It's safest place I can think of, and Bill and Fleur can help us plan our next move." They began walking, Lurch carrying their expanded bag of supplies as if it weighed nothing. In the moonlight, the butler's massive silhouette was even more imposing, his heavy footsteps leaving deep impressions in the soft ground. They were halfway to Shell Cottage when they heard it, the distinctive crack of apparition, followed by rough voices. "Snatchers," Ron hissed, pulling Hermione behind the hedge. Harry followed, but Lurch remained standing in the open, apparently not understanding the need for concealment. "Lurch!" Harry whispered urgently. "Hide!" But it was too late. 3 snatchers emerged from the darkness, their wands raised at the sight of the enormous figure standing in their path. "What the bloody hell is that?" one of them muttered. "Don't know, but it's on our hunting grounds," the leader replied, stepping forward with false bravado. "Oi! You there! Identify yourself!" Lurch turned slowly toward them and groaned, the sound echoing ominously across the field. The snatchers exchanged nervous glances. "Is it human?" one whispered. "Who cares? Stun it and we'll figure it out later," the leader commanded. "Could be worth something to the ministry." "Stupefy." The red jet of light struck Lurch square in the chest, and bounced off, ricocheting into the night sky. Lurch looked down at the spot where the spell had hit, then back at the snatchers, his expression unchanged but somehow more menacing. "What the leader began, but Lurch was already moving. With surprising speed for his size, he closed the distance between them in 3 massive strides. The snatchers fired more spells, stunning spells, impediment jinxes, even a cutting curse, but they all either bounced off or seemed to be absorbed into Lurch's massive frame without effect. Before the snatchers could retreat, Lurch had grabbed the leader by the front of his robes. He lifted the man off the ground with one hand and stared into his terrified face. "Youth," Lurch groaned disapprovingly. The other 2 snatchers turned to flee, but Harry, Ron, and Hermione were ready. 3 quick stunning spells dropped them before they could disapparate. The leader was still dangling from Lurch's grip, his face pale with fear. "What is that thing?" he gasped as Harry approached. "Family," Harry replied simply, then stunned the man. Lurch carefully lowered the unconscious snatcher to the ground. "Blimey," Ron breathed, looking at Lurch with newfound respect. "That was brilliant. Their spells didn't even touch him." Hermione was already examining the fallen snatchers. "We should take their wands. And check for anything useful, information about Voldemort's movements, maybe." Harry nodded, but his mind was racing with the implications of what they'd just witnessed. If Lurch was truly immune to most spell work, he could be more than just protection, he could be the key to getting close to Voldemort himself. A quick search of the snatchers yielded little of value except their wands and a few galleons. They left the men bound but unharmed, knowing they'd eventually free themselves or be found. "We need to hurry," Harry said. "If there are snatchers in the area, it's not safe to linger." They resumed their journey to Shell Cottage, moving more quickly now. As they crested the final dune and the small house came into view, Harry felt a surge of relief. The lights were on, smoke curling from the chimney, Bill and Fleur were home. Harry approached the protective boundary and called out. After a moment, Bill's voice responded from the darkness. "Identify yourself." "It's Harry," with Ron and Hermione, and a friend, Harry called back. When I was at the Burrow last summer, what did your mother try to make us all do before Bill and Fleur's wedding? There was a pause, then a chuckle. Get haircuts. Bill emerged from the shadows, wand still raised. When he spotted Lurch looming behind them, his scarred face registered shock. Bloody hell, who's your friend? It's a long story, Harry said. Can we come in? It's important. Bill hesitated, eyeing Lurch uncertainly, but then nodded. The wards will let you through if you're not under compulsion or polyjuice. They passed through the protective enchantments without incident, though Harry noticed they seemed to waver slightly as Lurch moved through them, as if the magic itself was uncertain what to make of him. Fleur met them at the door, her eyes widening at the sight of Lurch. To her credit, she recovered quickly. Come in, quickly, she ushered them inside. The others will be so pleased to see you. Others? Harry questioned. Luna's here, Bill explained, and Dean Thomas. They escaped from Malfoy Manor a few weeks ago, with help from Dobby. Dobby's here too? Harry asked, a weight lifting from his chest. The little elf had a special place in his heart. He comes and goes, Fleur said, leading them into the warm kitchen. He is helping move people to safe houses. Luna and Dean were sitting at the kitchen table, both looking thinner than Harry remembered but otherwise unharmed. They jumped to their feet at the sight of them. Harry! Luna exclaimed, her dreamy voice filled with genuine warmth. Her eyes shifted to Lurch, showing only mild curiosity rather than alarm. Oh, you've brought a friend. How lovely. Everyone, Harry said, this is Lurch. He's family, sort of. And he's going to help us. For the second time in as many days, Harry found himself explaining their situation, though this time he was more cautious about the Horcruxes, mentioning only that they were hunting important objects that could help defeat Voldemort. He told them about discovering his connection to the Addams family, about their help in locating the remaining Horcruxes, and about Lurch's apparent immunity to magic. Immune to magic? Bill repeated skeptically. That's impossible. Nothing's completely immune. In answer, Harry pointed his wand at Lurch. Sorry about this. Stupefy. The red jet struck Lurch's chest and dissipated like water hitting hot stone. Lurch didn't even blink. Bill let out a low whistle. That changes things. Exactly, Harry agreed. We know there are Horcruxes at Hogwarts and Gringotts. Getting to them won't be easy, but with Lurch. It might be possible, Bill finished, his mind clearly racing. Gringotts will be the harder of the two. Their security isn't just magical, they have dragons, goblin guards. But you worked there, Ron pointed out. You know the systems. Bill nodded slowly. I do. And I might be able to help you plan an approach. But Harry, even with your friend's resistance to magic, breaking into Gringotts would be incredibly dangerous. We don't have a choice, Harry said firmly. If we don't get these Horcruxes, Voldemort can't be defeated. Fleur, who had been quietly studying Lurch, spoke up. Your friend, he cannot speak. Not much, Harry explained. He understands everything, though. Fleur approached Lurch without fear. You are a good protector, yes. For Harry and his friends. Lurch nodded solemnly. You. Fleur smiled. Good. They need protection. She turned to the rest of them. You will stay here tonight. Plan. Rest. Tomorrow is soon enough to decide what comes next. No one argued with her. After months on the run, the prospect of a hot meal, warm beds, and safety, however temporary, was too tempting to resist. As the others settled in, Harry found himself sitting outside on the porch steps, staring at the stars. Lurch silently joined him, his massive form making the wooden step creak ominously. Thank you, Harry said quietly. For coming with us. For helping against those snatchers. Lurch made a dismissive noise, as if to say it was nothing. I've never had much family, Harry continued, finding it easier to talk to Lurch's quiet presence than he expected. My aunt and uncle, they were never kind. And now the Adamses, your family, they welcomed me instantly. No questions, no hesitation. Lurch nodded solemnly. Family, he managed again, the word sounding less strained this time. Yeah, Harry agreed. Family. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the waves crash against the shore below. For the first time in months, Harry felt something like hope stirring in his chest. With Lurch beside them, with the knowledge the Adamses had provided, with friends both old and new supporting them, maybe, just maybe, they could win this war. And as the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, Harry made a silent promise: when this was over, if he survived, he would visit his American relatives properly. He would get to know this strange, wonderful family that had embraced him without question. He would learn their stories, their magic, their ways. But first, they had Horcruxes to find. And a dark lord to defeat. Inside the cottage, plans were already forming. Tomorrow they would decide which Horcrux to pursue first, Hogwarts or Gringotts. But tonight, for a few hours at least, they could rest. And dream not of darkness, but of family. Chapter 2, The Battle Begins. Morning came too quickly at Shell Cottage. Harry found himself in the cramped kitchen with Ron, Hermione, Bill, and Fleur, maps spread across the table while Lurch stood quietly in the corner, occasionally handing Fleur ingredients for breakfast with surprising gentleness. Gringotts is the bigger risk, Bill said, tracing routes through a rough sketch of the bank. But if Bellatrix was panicked enough to torture Hermione over the possibility you'd been in her vault, there's something valuable there. We know it's the cup, Harry replied, lowering his voice though Luna and Dean were still asleep upstairs. Hufflepuff's cup. It's a Horcrux. Bill's scarred face tightened. And you're certain there's another at Hogwarts? Based on the detection magic we did with the Adamses, yes, Hermione confirmed. Something with the same magical signature is there. Ron wolfed down a piece of toast. So which do we hit first? The impenetrable wizard bank or the Death Eater-controlled school? Hogwarts, Harry decided. We know people inside, Neville, Ginny, the DA. They can help us search. And with Lurch. He glanced at the towering butler. We might actually stand a chance of getting in and out quickly. Bill nodded reluctantly. Makes sense. But you'll need a way in that bypasses the Carrows and Snape. Aberforth, Harry remembered suddenly. Dumbledore's brother. He owns the Hog's Head. Sirius once mentioned he's part of the Order. That could work, Bill agreed. You apparate to Hogsmeade, find Aberforth, and he might know a way in that isn't watched. A thunderous crack from outside made them all jump. Lurch moved with surprising speed, positioning himself between the door and Harry before anyone else could react. Bill was at the window in seconds, wand drawn. His tension visibly eased. It's Dobby. The door burst open and the small house elf tumbled in, ears flapping with excitement. Harry Potter, he squeaked, then froze at the sight of Lurch. It's okay, Dobby, Harry said quickly. This is Lurch. He's a friend. Dobby approached cautiously, circling Lurch with professional interest. Not a wizard, he determined after a moment. Not an elf. Not a goblin. He looked up at Lurch's impassive face. What is Sir, if Dobby may ask? Family, Harry answered before Lurch could attempt a response. He's family, and he's helping us. That seemed to satisfy Dobby. Harry Potter is going to Hogwarts, he said, not a question but a statement. Dobby has heard whispers in the kitchens. The students are fighting back, Harry Potter. Neville Longbottom and others, they hide in a special room that gives them what they need. Harry exchanged looks with Ron and Hermione. The room of requirement. It's perfect, Hermione breathed. If we can get to Hogwarts and contact the DA, we'll have allies to help search for the Horcrux. And if things go south, Ron added, we've got Lurch. As if on cue, Lurch groaned affirmatively, straightening his tie with dignity. Dobby can take you, the elf offered eagerly. Past the apparition boundaries, into Hogsmeade. Dobby knows a safe place. Harry looked at his friends. Tonight, he decided. We go tonight. Hogsmeade under Death Eater control was a shadow of the cheerful village Harry remembered. Windows were boarded up, streets deserted, and an oppressive silence hung over everything like a shroud. The moment they apparat with Dobby into a narrow alleyway, a piercing alarm shattered the quiet. Caterwauling charm. Hermione gasped. They've set a trap. This way. Dobby squeaked, pulling them toward a door nearly hidden between two shops. Lurch moved with surprising silence for someone so large, keeping to the shadows as they slipped through the door just as shouts and running footsteps filled the street. They found themselves in a dusty storage room. Dobby led them through another door into what Harry recognized as the back room of the Hog's Head Inn. A gruff voice made them freeze. Thought you might show up eventually, Potter. A tall figure emerged from the shadows, Aberforth Dumbledore, his resemblance to his brother unmistakable despite his unkempt appearance. We need to get into Hogwarts, Harry said without preamble. Aberforth's eyes flickered to Lurch, widening slightly. And who's your friend? Lurch, Harry said. He's immune to most magic. Is he now? Aberforth studied the butler with new interest. That might be helpful, considering the state of things at the school. How bad is it? Hermione asked. Bad enough, Aberforth grunted. The Carrows enjoy their work a little too much, if you take my meaning. Snape turns a blind eye to most of it, though some say he's secretly been keeping the worst excesses in check. We need to find something, Harry pressed. Something hidden in the castle. It's vital to defeating Voldemort. Aberforth's bushy eyebrows rose at Harry's use of the name. You're either very brave or very foolish, boy. Bit of both, Ron muttered. There's a way in, Aberforth finally said, nodding toward a portrait of a young girl on the wall. Ariana can help you. To their amazement, the girl in the portrait smiled and turned, walking deeper into her painted landscape. Where she should have disappeared from view, a tunnel opened instead, a real tunnel extending from the painting into darkness. The students use it to get supplies, Aberforth explained. Your big friend there might have a tight squeeze, but it'll get you inside. Harry thanked Aberforth, then turned to Dobby. Go back to Shell Cottage. Tell Bill we've made it to Hogsmeade. If you don't hear from us by morning, Dobby will come for Harry Potter, the elf promised solemnly. With a crack, he disappeared. The tunnel was indeed a tight fit for Lurch, who had to stoop considerably and still scraped his shoulders against the rough walls. They walked for what seemed like miles in the dim light of their wands, until finally they saw an opening ahead. Another portrait swung outward, and they stepped into a room Harry had never seen before, a vast space filled with hammocks, house banners, and dozens of familiar faces that turned toward them in shock. Harry! Neville Longbottom rushed forward, his face scarred but his eyes bright with hope. Behind him, Harry recognized members of Dumbledore's army, Seamus, Lavender, the Patil twins, Luna who must have been transported from Shell Cottage and others, all looking battle-worn but determined. Their reunion froze when Lurch ducked through the portrait hole, his massive frame seeming to fill the entire entrance. Bloody hell, Seamus whispered. What is that? Who? Harry corrected firmly. This is Lurch. He's family, and he's here to help. Neville, to his credit, recovered quickly. He stepped forward and offered Lurch his hand. Any friend of Harry's is welcome here. Lurch took Neville's hand carefully, as if afraid of crushing it, and groaned what was clearly meant to be a greeting. He doesn't talk much, Hermione explained. Can he fight? Seamus asked bluntly. Ron grinned. Spells bounce off him. Literally. We saw him take down 3 snatchers without breaking a sweat. A murmur of impressed whispers ran through the room. Harry could see hope kindling in faces that had clearly known little but fear for months. "Why are you here, Harry?" Neville asked, getting straight to the point. "Is it time? Are we fighting back?" Harry hesitated, looking at the eager faces around him. These weren't the children who had gathered for DA meetings years ago. These were soldiers, hardened by months of resistance. "We're looking for something," he admitted. "Something hidden in Hogwarts. Finding it could help us defeat Voldemort." "Then we'll help you find it," Neville said simply. "What is it?" "We're not exactly sure," Harry said, choosing his words carefully. "It might be something of Ravenclaw's. Something small, important." Luna stepped forward. "The only famous Ravenclaw artifact is the lost diadem," she said dreamily. "But it's been missing for centuries." "A diadem?" Harry asked. "Like a crown. It's supposed to enhance the wisdom of the wearer," Luna explained. "There's a statue of Rowena Ravenclaw wearing it in our common room." Harry's heart raced. That had to be it. "I need to see that statue." "I'll take you," Luna offered. "Wait," Neville interrupted. "The Carrows and Snape are still out there. And if they catch you, Harry?" "That's where Lurch comes in," Harry said, turning to the butler. "Lurch, if anyone tries to stop us, anyone wearing black robes with masks, or Snape, the headmaster, you protect us. Understand?" Lurch nodded solemnly, cracking his massive knuckles with a sound like breaking branches. "We should split up," Hermione suggested. "Harry, you and Luna go to Ravenclaw Tower with Lurch. Ron and I will check the Chamber of Secrets. The basilisk fangs could destroy the Horcrux once we find it." "And the rest of us?" Neville asked. "Be ready," Harry said after a moment's thought. "Once we find this object, Voldemort will know we're here. He'll come with everything he has. We need to be prepared to fight or evacuate, depending on how things go." Neville nodded grimly. "We'll spread the word. The DA coins still work, we've been using them to coordinate. I'll contact the Order too." As the room erupted into activity, Harry pulled Ron and Hermione aside. "Be careful in the chamber," he warned. "Get the fangs and come straight back here." "What about you?" Hermione asked, eyeing Lurch. "Even with him, you're taking a risk going through the castle." "A necessary risk," Harry replied. "Lurch can handle whatever comes our way." They parted with quick hugs, Ron and Hermione slipping out through a different passage that Neville assured them would take them close to Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Harry turned to Luna and Lurch. "Ready?" Luna smiled serenely. "It's good to be doing something, isn't it? Rather than just hiding." Harry couldn't help but smile back. Even after months of imprisonment, Luna's spirit remained unbroken. They slipped out of the room of requirement and into the dark corridors of Hogwarts. The castle felt different, oppressive, watchful, as if the very stones were under duress. They moved silently, Luna leading the way with Harry under his invisibility cloak while Lurch followed at a slight distance, his footsteps unnervingly quiet for someone his size. They had nearly reached Ravenclaw Tower when disaster struck. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with Alecto Carrow, her piggy eyes widening at the sight of Luna. "Student out of bed," she crowed, raising her wand. Then she spotted Lurch looming behind and faltered. "What in Merlin's name?" Before she could finish, Lurch moved. With 2 massive strides, he reached the Death Eater and simply plucked the wand from her hand, snapping it between 2 fingers like a toothpick. Alecto opened her mouth to scream, but Lurch's enormous hand covered her face completely. With what looked like minimal effort, he lifted her off the ground. Harry threw off the invisibility cloak. "Don't hurt her," he instructed quickly. "Just, put her somewhere she can't raise the alarm." Lurch nodded and looked around. With his free hand, he opened a nearby broom closet, stuffed the struggling Death Eater inside, and wedged a suit of armor against the door. "That was efficient," Luna remarked, as if commenting on an interesting cloud formation. "Her brother will notice she's missing eventually," Harry said, urgency in his voice. "We need to hurry." They reached Ravenclaw Tower without further incident. Luna answered the Eagle Knocker's riddle: what comes once in a minute, twice in a moment, but never in 1,000 years? The letter M, and they slipped into the deserted common room. The statue of Rowena Ravenclaw stood by the far wall, elegant and imposing. On her head sat an intricately carved stone replica of the diadem, delicate and beautiful, with the inscription, "Wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure." "That's it," Harry whispered, recognition flaring. "I've seen it before. The real one." Luna looked at him curiously. "Where?" "The Room of Requirement," Harry realized. "Last year, when I was hiding my potions book. I put it on a stone bust to mark the spot. It was the diadem." A cold voice from the common room entrance froze his blood. "Indeed it was, Potter." Severus Snape stood in the doorway, his wand raised and his black eyes fixed on Harry. He hadn't noticed Lurch, who had stepped behind a tall bookcase at their entrance. "Step away from the girl, Potter," Snape commanded. "My quarrel isn't with students. Just with teachers you murder." Harry spat, his own wand rising. Something flickered in Snape's eyes, pain. But his face remained impassive. "You understand nothing, as usual." "I understand enough," Harry retorted. "You betrayed my parents. You killed Dumbledore. You've handed Hogwarts to torturers and murderers. And yet, here you are," Snape said softly, walking willingly into the serpent's den. "Your mother's sacrifice was wasted on such foolishness." At the mention of Lily, Lurch emerged from his hiding place with a deep, rumbling groan that seemed to shake the very foundation of the tower. Snape whirled, his wand shifting targets immediately, but the spell he fired, a silent stunner, simply dissipated against Lurch's chest. For the first time, Harry saw genuine shock on Snape's face. "What manner of creature?" He didn't finish. Lurch closed the distance between them in 2 strides and lifted Snape by his robes as easily as he had Electo Caro. Snape fired spell after spell directly into Lurch's face, but they might as well have been gentle rain for all the effect they had. "Stop," Harry commanded, and Lurch froze, holding Snape suspended a foot off the ground. "Not so powerful now, are you?" Harry asked Snape coldly. Snape's black eyes darted from Lurch to Harry. "Potter," he gasped, struggling to speak with Lurch's massive hand constricting his robes. "Listen to me. The Dark Lord knows we're hunting Horcruxes," Harry finished for him. "Yes, I'm sure you told him that." "No." For the first time, urgency cracked Snape's controlled demeanor. "He knows you're here. Now. He's coming, Potter. With everything he has." A cold weight settled in Harry's stomach. "How?" "The Caros have a direct communication method. When Electo didn't report in, Amicus activated it." Snape's eyes flickered to Luna. "Take the students and run, Potter. You cannot win this battle. You expect me to believe you care what happens to us?" Harry scoffed. Something changed in Snape's expression, a crumbling of his rigid control. "Your mother," whatever he was about to say was cut off by the sudden, searing pain in Harry's scar. He staggered, clutching his forehead as visions flashed through his mind, Voldemort, rage flooding through him, flying toward Hogwarts with an army at his back. "He's coming," Harry gasped. "He knows." He looked up at Lurch. "We need to get back to the others. Now. Bring him," he added, nodding at Snape. They couldn't risk leaving him free to coordinate with the Death Eaters. Lurch nodded and tucked the struggling Snape under one arm like a package. They raced back through the castle, no longer caring about stealth. As they ran, Harry saw professors emerging from their quarters, confusion and alarm on their faces. "Potter?" Professor McGonagall gasped, spotting them in the corridor. Her eyes widened at the sight of Lurch carrying Snape like a sack of potatoes. What in Merlin's name? Voldemort's coming, Harry cut her off. He's bringing an army. We need to secure the castle, get the younger students out. To her credit, McGonagall didn't waste time with questions. The evacuation plan, she said briskly, turning to the other teachers who had gathered. Flitwick, Sprout, begin immediately. Slughorn, alert the prefects. We must protect the students. And the castle? Harry pressed. McGonagall's eyes hardened. We will defend Hogwarts, Potter. Whatever you need to do, we will give you time. Harry nodded gratefully. We're going to the room of requirement. There's something there we need. And Snape? She asked, eyeing the headmaster, who had stopped struggling and was watching the proceedings with an unreadable expression. He comes with us, Harry decided. We can't trust him. A wise precaution, McGonagall agreed. Then, to Harry's surprise, she addressed Lurch directly. You, sir, I don't know what or who you are, but if you're helping Potter, you're an ally of Hogwarts. Lurch shifted Snape to his other arm and gave McGonagall what might have been a small bow. You. Quite, McGonagall replied, as if she understood perfectly. Now go, Potter. Do what you must. We'll hold them as long as we can. They parted ways, McGonagall and the other teachers moving with purpose toward the Great Hall while Harry, Luna, and Lurch with his unwilling cargo raced toward the 7th floor. The room of requirement was transformed when they arrived, no longer the hideout for Dumbledore's army but a cathedral-sized space filled with centuries of hidden objects. Ron and Hermione were already there, their faces grave. We got the fangs, Ron reported, holding up a bag that clinked with broken basilisk teeth. What happened to you? And why is Lurch carrying Snape? Voldemort knows we're here, Harry said grimly. He's coming. We need to find the diadem now. Hermione gasped at the sight of Snape, but quickly refocused. The diadem's here. In this room. I saw it last year, Harry explained, already moving down an aisle of discarded objects. I used it to mark where I hid my potions book. Lurch deposited Snape on the floor, keeping one massive hand on his shoulder to prevent escape. Snape, surprisingly, made no move to resist. His black eyes followed Harry with an intensity that was unsettling. Split up, Harry instructed. Look for a stone bust with a wig and a tiara. They spread out, weaving through towering piles of furniture, books, and forgotten contraband. The room was a maze, and Harry's memory of the exact location was frustratingly vague. Potter, Snape called from where Lurch held him. The Dark Lord will breach the castle's defenses within the hour. Whatever you're seeking, you must find it quickly. Shut up, Ron snapped. Like we'd take advice from you. Snape's lip curled. Your childish grudges are luxuries none of us can afford now, Weasley. The Dark Lord comes with giants, dementors, acromantulas, every dark creature he could muster. Even your. He glanced at Lurch, unusual friend may not be enough. A distant explosion shook dust from the precarious piles around them. The battle had begun. There. Hermione suddenly called. Harry, I think I've found it. They converged on her location. Sure enough, there was the bust, the wig, and perched on top, gleaming dully in the dim light, was Ravenclaw's diadem. Harry approached it cautiously. Even from a distance, he could feel the malevolent energy pulsing from the artifact, the same dark sensation he'd felt from the locket and the diary. It's definitely a Horcrux, he confirmed. I can feel it. Ron pulled a basilisk fong from his bag. Well, let's destroy it then. Another explosion, closer this time, made them all duck instinctively. Lurch, still gripping Snape, didn't flinch. We should go back to the main room, Luna suggested. Help the others. First, the Horcrux, Harry insisted. He reached for the diadem, but as his fingers brushed the metal, his scar exploded with pain. He staggered back, visions flooding his mind, Voldemort at the gates, blasting through the protective enchantments, Death Eaters swarming behind him. "He's here," Harry gasped. "At the gates." Ron didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, grabbed the diadem, and placed it on the floor. Without ceremony, he stabbed down with the basilisk fang. The diadem shrieked, black smoke pouring from it as the venom destroyed the soul fragment within. "That's 3 down," Hermione said grimly. "The locket, the ring, and now the diadem." "The cup is still in Gringotts," Harry reminded her. "And Nagini's with Voldemort." "And the 6th?" Hermione asked quietly, so only Harry could hear. Harry shook his head. They still didn't know what the 6th Horcrux might be, and now wasn't the time to speculate. "Let's get back to the others," he decided. "They'll need our help." When they emerged from the room of requirement, the castle was in chaos. Students were being evacuated through the room's connection to the Hog's Head, while older students and teachers were rushing to defensive positions. The distant sounds of battle echoed through the stone corridors. Neville met them at the entrance to the Great Hall. "They've broken through the outer wards," he reported grimly. "McGonagall and Flitwick are reinforcing the bridge and the main doors, but it won't hold for long." Harry made a quick decision. "Ron, Hermione, go with Neville. Help coordinate the defense. Luna, find the other DA members, make sure the younger students get out safely." He turned to Lurch. "You're with me. We're going to the front lines." "What about him?" Ron asked, nodding toward Snape, who was still firmly in Lurch's grasp. "Bring him," Harry decided. "I want to see his face when his master fails." They parted ways, Harry and Lurch with his prisoner heading for the main entrance. As they emerged onto the stone steps, Harry got his first view of the battle, and his heart nearly stopped. Hundreds of Death Eaters were advancing across the grounds, firing curses that splashed against the castle's hastily reinforced barriers. Giants lumbered behind them, using massive tree trunks as clubs. Dementors swarmed overhead, their chilling presence making frost spread across the windows. And in the center of it all, floating above the ground like a specter of death, was Voldemort himself, Nagini coiled around his shoulders. Professor McGonagall stood at the forefront of Hogwarts defenders, her wand weaving complex patterns that strengthened the castle's ancient protections. Beside her, the other teachers and older students cast their own spells, their combined magic creating a shimmering dome that was already cracking under the assault. "Potter," McGonagall called when she spotted him. "We cannot hold them for much longer." "You don't have to," Harry assured her, stepping forward with Lurch at his side. "Just get everyone inside when I give the signal. We're going to thin their ranks." McGonagall's eyes darted to Lurch, then back to Harry. "What are you planning?" Instead of answering, Harry turned to Lurch. "Those people out there," he said, pointing to the Death Eaters. "They're trying to hurt my friends. Our family." Lurch's expression darkened, his normally impassive face taking on a menacing cast that made even McGonagall step back. He set Snape down, keeping one massive hand clamped on the man's shoulder, and looked to Harry for instructions. "Go out there," Harry said simply. "Show them what happens when they threaten your family." Lurch released Snape, pushing him toward McGonagall who quickly bound him with magical ropes. Then, with deliberate calm, Lurch straightened his tie, adjusted his cuffs, and descended the stone steps toward the approaching army. "Potter," Snape's voice was urgent. "What is that thing?" "Not a thing," Harry corrected coldly. "His name is Lurch. He's family." The approaching Death Eaters faltered when they saw the enormous figure walking calmly toward them. A few fired experimental curses, but the jets of light simply dissipated against Lurch's chest without effect. Their confusion was palpable even from a distance. "What is this?" Voldemort's high, cold voice carried across the grounds. "Potter sends a single servant to face Lord Voldemort's army." In answer, Lurch increased his pace. As the first rank of Death Eaters raised their wands in unison, Lurch broke into a run, a surprisingly fast, ground-eating lope that closed the distance between them in seconds. What followed was unlike anything Harry had ever seen. Lurch plowed into the Death Eaters like a bowling ball into pins. His massive hands grabbed wands and snapped them, seized robes and flung their wearers bodily through the air. Spells bounced off him, ricocheting back into the crowd and causing further chaos. A Death Eater tried to apparate away, only to rematerialize a foot away as the castle's anti-apparition wards held firm. Lurch casually picked him up and used him as a club against 3 others. "Kill it!" Voldemort screamed, his composure cracking at the sight of his forces being dismantled by a single opponent. A giant lumbered forward, swinging its massive club at Lurch. The butler sidestepped with surprising grace and caught the club mid-swing. For a moment, there was a contest of strength, the giant pulling, Lurch holding firm. Then, with a mighty heave, Lurch yanked the club away and swung it in a wide arc that sent Death Eaters flying in all directions. "Bloody hell," Harry heard Ron whisper from beside him. His friends had joined him on the steps. "He's actually doing it. He's driving them back." It was true. The Death Eater ranks were breaking, their neat formation dissolving into chaos as they scrambled to escape Lurch's methodical advance. Some tried to stand their ground, firing killing curses that splashed harmlessly against him. Others turned to flee, only to find their escape blocked by their own allies. And through it all, Lurch moved with the inevitability of death itself, not fast, not flashy, but unstoppable. When his path was blocked, he simply picked up the obstacle and moved it. When spells flew at him, he ignored them like summer rain. When a Death Eater was foolish enough to come within reach, they were disarmed, disabled, and often used as projectiles against their comrades. "Harry," Hermione breathed. "Look at Voldemort." Harry tore his eyes away from Lurch's rampage to see Voldemort floating higher, his snake-like face contorted with rage and something Harry had never seen there before, uncertainty. "Fall back." Voldemort commanded his forces. "Regroup beyond the gates." The retreat quickly became a rout. Death Eaters abandoned any pretense of order, fleeing from Lurch as he continued his implacable advance. A few of the braver, or more terrified of Voldemort, stood their ground, forming a protective circle around their master as he floated backward toward the gates. "Now!" Harry called to the defenders. "While they're disorganized." McGonagall didn't need telling twice. She signaled the waiting students and teachers, who surged forward, their spells striking the retreating Death Eaters from behind. The counterattack caught Voldemort's forces between 2 threats, magic from behind, Lurch from ahead, and broke what little resolve they had left. In the midst of the chaos, Harry caught sight of a massive snake slithering through the grass, Nagini, abandoned by Voldemort in his retreat. Without thinking, Harry sprinted down the steps, basilisk fang in hand. "Harry, no!" Hermione screamed, but he was already halfway across the courtyard. Nagini sensed him coming and reared up, hood flaring, fangs bared. But before she could strike, an enormous shadow fell over them both. Lurch, somehow aware of Harry's danger, had abandoned his pursuit of the retreating Death Eaters and returned with astonishing speed. With one swift movement, Lurch grabbed Nagini behind the head, his massive hand easily controlling the thrashing serpent. He held her out to Harry like an offering. "You," he groaned, which Harry somehow understood as a question, "What should I do with this?" "Hold her still," Harry instructed, raising the basilisk fang. He hesitated only a moment, remembering the fragment of Voldemort's soul that had lived within this creature, and then plunged the fang deep into Nagini's body. The snake convulsed, black smoke pouring from the wound, a high-pitched scream cutting through the sounds of battle. From the gates came an inhuman howl of rage. Voldemort had seen the destruction of his final protector, his last Horcrux besides Harry himself. Potter. The name was torn from Voldemort's lips like a curse. "This isn't over." With a final, hateful glare, Voldemort disappeared in a swirl of black smoke. Those Death Eaters who could still move followed suit, disapparating the moment they cleared the castle's boundaries. Silence fell over the battlefield. Lurch dropped Nagini's lifeless body and turned to Harry, head tilted in a silent question. "You did it," Harry said, awe in his voice. "You drove them off." Lurch adjusted his tie modestly and groaned what might have been a dismissal of the praise. "Harry." Hermione and Ron were running toward them, followed by Neville, Luna, and the other defenders. Their faces showed a mix of shock, relief, and dawning hope. "Is it over?" Neville asked, surveying the scattered Death Eaters who hadn't managed to escape, some unconscious, others moaning in pain or simply too terrified to move. "No," Harry said grimly. "Voldemort's retreated, but he'll be back. With reinforcements." "Then we'd better be ready," Ron said, looking at Lurch with newfound respect. "Though with him on our side, I almost feel sorry for the Death Eaters." Almost. They returned to the castle, bringing their prisoners with them. The Great Hall had been converted into a combination hospital wing and command center. The house tables were gone, replaced by rows of beds for the injured and a large strategy table in the center where professors and order members gathered. Kingsley Shacklebolt, who had arrived with other order members during the battle, approached them. "Potter," he greeted Harry. "McGonagall tells me we have you and your unusual friend to thank for repelling the first attack." "This is Lurch," Harry introduced him. "He's immune to magic." Kingsley studied the butler with professional interest. "Useful trait in the current circumstances. But Voldemort won't be caught off guard twice. He'll adapt his strategy." "Which is why we need to prepare," Harry agreed. "This isn't over. The next attack will be worse." As if to confirm his words, a cold, high voice suddenly echoed throughout the castle, Voldemort, using some form of magical amplification to address them all. "You have fought valiantly, but in vain," the voice declared. "I do not wish to spill magical blood unnecessarily. Give me Harry Potter, surrender your monster, and none shall be harmed. Continue to resist, and every man, woman, and child who hides them will suffer my displeasure. You have 1 hour." Silence fell in the Great Hall. All eyes turned to Harry and Lurch. "Well," Ron said finally. "That's Tornit. He's absolutely terrified of Lurch. And now he knows we've destroyed Nagini," Hermione added quietly, so only their immediate group could hear. "He knows we're hunting Horcruxes. Which means he'll be checking on the others," Harry realized. "The cup in Gringotts. We'll never reach it in time," Hermione said, despair creeping into her voice. "Perhaps," a new voice interrupted, "there is another way." They turned to see Snape, still bound but now seated on a chair nearby, McGonagall standing guard over him. "Why should we listen to anything you have to say?" Ron demanded. Snape's black eyes fixed on Harry. "Because, Mr. Weasley, I have been Dumbledore's man from the moment the Dark Lord threatened Lily Potter." The statement hit Harry like a physical blow. "You're lying," he managed. "I have no reason to lie now, Potter," Snape replied wearily. "The Dark Lord believes me compromised. My usefulness as a spy is over. But I still have information that may help you end this." "Let him speak, Harry," McGonagall said unexpectedly. "I've been watching him. I believe he may be telling the truth." Harry hesitated, then nodded. "What information?" "The cup is not the only remaining Horcrux," Snape said quietly. "There is one more. Dumbledore believed it was created accidentally. The night your parents died. Ice spread through Harry's veins. "Me," he whispered. "I'm a Horcrux." Hermione gasped. Ron swore under his breath. But Snape was already shaking his head. "Not exactly. The fragment of soul within you is unstable, improperly attached. It can be destroyed without harming you, but only by Voldemort himself." "What are you saying?" Hermione demanded. That Harry has to let Voldemort kill him? No, Snape replied. The Dark Lord must attack Potter, yes, but with your friend's unique abilities, he nodded toward Lurch, there may be a way to ensure only the soul fragment is destroyed. Hope, fragile but real, bloomed in Harry's chest. How? For the next half hour, as the castle prepared for the second wave of attack, Snape explained Dumbledore's theories about the connection between Harry and Voldemort, about the nature of Horcruxes, and about a complex piece of ancient magic that might allow Lurch to intercept a killing curse meant for Harry in such a way that it destroyed only the Horcrux. It's dangerous, Snape concluded. It requires precise timing, and your friend's magical resistance has never been tested against the killing curse specifically. But it could work. Harry pressed. Snape nodded reluctantly. In theory. Harry turned to Lurch, who had listened to the entire explanation without expression. It would mean putting yourself between me and Voldemort's wand. Taking a killing curse meant for me. I can't ask that of you. Lurch placed a massive hand on Harry's shoulder. Family, he said simply, the word coming more easily now with practice. Tears pricked Harry's eyes. Thank you, he said softly. This is all very touching, Snape interrupted dryly, but our hour is nearly up. The Dark Lord will not delay his attack this time. As if in response to his words, the castle shook with a massive impact. The defenders rushed to the windows to see a sight that chilled their blood. Voldemort had returned, and his army had doubled in size. Death Eaters, giants, trolls, acromantulas, and now inferi, animated corpses, shambled across the grounds toward the castle. He's pulled out all the stops, Ron muttered. McGonagall turned to the assembled defenders. To your positions. Remember the plan, hold the entrances, funnel them through the choke points. The students and teachers scattered, taking up predetermined defensive positions throughout the castle. Harry turned to Lurch. Stay with me, he instructed. No matter what happens, stay close. When Voldemort comes for me, and he will, that's when we spring Snape's trap. Lurch nodded solemnly, then surprised Harry by adjusting the boy's collar with almost paternal care. The simple gesture nearly undid Harry completely. Careful, he managed with a wobbly smile. People will think you're getting fond of me. You, Lurch groaned, which somehow clearly meant, too late for that. The second wave hit harder than the first. The Death Eaters had learned from their earlier defeat and kept their distance, using the giants and inferi as shock troops while they bombarded the castle with curses from afar. The defensive spells held, but cracks were beginning to show in the ancient stone. Harry and Lurch positioned themselves on the main staircase, a central location from which they could quickly move to any part of the castle that needed reinforcement. Ron and Hermione guarded the entrance to the Great Hall, where the wounded were being treated. Neville led a group defending the bridge, while Luna and Ginny coordinated from the towers, raining down spells on attackers who got too close to the walls. For an hour, the battle raged in stalemate. The castle's defenses, strengthened by generations of headmasters, held against the assault. When breaches occurred, defenders rushed to plug the gaps. Twice, Death Eaters managed to enter the castle, only to be driven back by concentrated spell fire and, in one case, Lurch simply picking them up and throwing them bodily back out through a window. But they were being worn down. The defenders were tiring, while Voldemort's forces seemed endless. And Voldemort himself remained at a distance, directing the assault rather than participating, waiting, Harry knew, for him to emerge. We need to end this, Harry said to Lurch as they repelled yet another incursion. Too many people are getting hurt. Lurch nodded gravely, understanding what Harry was suggesting without words being needed. I'm going out there, Harry decided. To face him. Draw him away from the castle. Not alone, Hermione's voice came from behind them. She and Ron had abandoned their post to find him. We're coming with you. No, Harry said firmly. I need you here. If something goes wrong. If Snape's plan doesn't work, someone needs to finish this. Find the cup. Destroy it. Harry, Ron began, but Harry cut him off. Please, he said quietly. I need to know you'll finish it if I can't. The pain in his friends' faces was almost unbearable, but they nodded reluctantly. Just Lurch, Harry confirmed. He's the key to the plan. With final hugs that felt too much like goodbyes, Harry and Lurch separated from Ron and Hermione. They made their way down to the main entrance, where McGonagall was directing the defense. Potter, she questioned, seeing his determined expression. I'm ending this, he told her. Keep everyone inside. No matter what you see or hear, keep them inside until it's over. Understanding dawned in McGonagall's eyes. For a moment, she looked as if she might object, but instead she straightened her back and nodded once, sharply. Good luck, Potter. And you, she addressed Lurch directly, take care of him. Lurch bowed formally, then followed Harry out onto the stone steps. The attack faltered as Harry emerged, the Death Eaters uncertain whether to continue their assault or alert their master. Harry didn't wait for them to decide. Voldemort, he shouted, his voice magically amplified by a quick sonorous charm. Face me yourself, you coward. The battlefield fell silent. Then, like a nightmare taking form, a black shape rose from behind the Death Eater lines, Voldemort, flying without a broom, his robes billowing around him like wings. He descended slowly, landing 100 yards from the steps with unnatural grace. His red eyes fixed on Harry with naked hatred. Potter, he said softly, though his voice carried clearly across the distance. Come to die at last. Just to end this, Harry replied, descending the steps with Lurch at his side. No one else needs to die today. Voldemort's gaze shifted to Lurch, and his lipless mouth twisted. Your pet monster won't save you this time, Potter. I've studied it since our last encounter. Impressive magical resistance, yes, but everything has its limits. He's not a monster, Harry said calmly. He's family. Something you wouldn't understand. Rage flashed across Voldemort's face. I understand power, Potter. And when you're dead, your creature will serve me, or join you. Harry felt Lurch tense beside him, a low growl building in the butler's chest. He placed a calming hand on Lurch's arm. Remember the plan, he murmured. Wait for the right moment. They stopped 30 feet from Voldemort. The Dark Lord held his wand loosely, almost casually, but Harry knew he could strike with serpent-like speed when he chose. Your Horcruxes are gone, Harry said clearly, wanting everyone to hear. Nagini was the last. It's just you now, Tom. Just a man. Fear and fury warred in Voldemort's red eyes. You lie. The diary, the ring, the locket, the diadem, the snake, Harry counted off. All destroyed. You're mortal, Tom. With a howl of rage, Voldemort raised his wand. Avada Kedavra. The jet of green light shot toward Harry with blinding speed. But Lurch was faster. With reflexes that belied his size, he stepped directly into the path of the curse, his massive body completely shielding Harry. The killing curse struck Lurch square in the chest, and rebounded. Not in the way it had rebounded from Harry as a baby, not in a way that struck Voldemort directly. Instead, the curse seemed to fragment, green light splintering into dozens of smaller bolts that scattered in all directions. One of these fragments struck Harry, but instead of killing him, it felt like an icy knife being withdrawn from his scar, painful, but purifying. He staggered, falling to his knees as something black and oily leaked from his scar, evaporating with a thin scream. The Horcrux within him, destroyed not by Harry's death but by the fragmented killing curse. Voldemort screamed too, clutching his chest as if physically wounded by the destruction of the soul fragment. His red eyes widened in realization and fear. What have you done? He gasped. Lurch, completely unharmed by the killing curse, helped Harry to his feet. Harry stared at Voldemort, feeling lighter, cleaner than he had in years. It's over, Tom, he said softly. You've lost. Never. Voldemort raised his wand again, desperation making his movements jerky. Avada Kedavra. But this time, Harry was ready. As Lurch again moved to intercept, Harry raised his own wand. Expelliarmus. The spells met in midair. The killing curse again fragmented against Lurch's impervious form, while Harry's disarming charm shot through the disruption and struck Voldemort's wand. The Elder Wand flew from Voldemort's hand, spinning high into the air, and landed neatly in Harry's outstretched palm. For a moment, no one moved. Voldemort stared at his empty hand in disbelief. The Death Eaters watched in horrified silence. From the castle came a rising cheer as the defenders realized what had happened. "It's over," Harry repeated, both wands now pointed at Voldemort. The Dark Lord's red eyes darted from Harry to Lurch, then to his scattered forces, calculating his chances. Whatever he saw there made his face contort with fury and fear. "This isn't over, Potter," he hissed. "I cannot be defeated. I will return, stronger than before." With a swirl of his robes, Voldemort transformed into a swirling cloud of black smoke. But before he could flee, Lurch moved again, impossibly fast for his size, his massive hand plunging into the smoke and somehow gripping something solid within it. Voldemort was yanked back into human form, Lurch's enormous hand closed around his throat. He thrashed and clawed, but Lurch held him as easily as a child holds a doll, his impassive face showing nothing but mild disapproval at the Dark Lord's behavior. "You," Lurch groaned disapprovingly, giving Voldemort a small shake for emphasis. "How?" Voldemort choked out, his red eyes bulging with disbelief and terror. "What are you?" "He's family," Harry said simply, stepping forward. "And you've threatened his family for the last time." With Voldemort immobilized in Lurch's grasp, Harry pointed both wands at the Dark Lord's chest. He wasn't sure what spell to use, nothing seemed adequate for this moment. But he never had to decide. Lurch looked at Harry, a question in his normally expressionless eyes. Harry understood and nodded once. With a swift, almost gentle motion, Lurch closed his massive hand. There was a sharp crack, and Voldemort's body went limp. The most feared Dark Lord in a century, defeated not by some grand spell or ancient magic, but by the simple, protective action of a family servant. Lurch carefully lowered Voldemort's body to the ground, then straightened his tie, as if what he'd just done was no more remarkable than serving tea. A shocked silence fell over the battlefield. The Death Eaters stared in disbelief at their fallen master. Then, as one, they began to flee, some disapparating with frantic cracks, others simply turning and running. Without Voldemort's will controlling them, the giants and other creatures retreated as well, disappearing into the forbidden forest or lumbering away across the grounds. From the castle came an eruption of cheers and cries of relief. People poured out onto the steps, disregarding Harry's earlier instruction to stay inside. Ron and Hermione were the first to reach him, throwing their arms around him in a desperate embrace. "You did it," Hermione sobbed against his shoulder. "You actually did it." "We did it," Harry corrected, reaching out to include Lurch in their circle. The butler hesitated, then awkwardly patted all three of their heads with his enormous hand, drawing unexpected laughter from them despite the solemnity of the moment. McGonagall approached next, her normally stern face streaked with tears of relief. "Potter," she began, then seemed at a loss for words. Instead, she turned to Lurch and offered her hand. "Thank you," she said simply. Lurch took her hand with surprising gentleness, bowing formally over it like an old-world gentleman. "You," he groaned, which everyone somehow understood as, "You're welcome." As the survivors gathered around them, offering thanks and congratulations, Harry felt a strange mixture of emotions, relief, grief for those lost, disbelief that it was truly over. But strongest of all was gratitude for the strange, silent butler who had changed everything. "Lurch," he said quietly, as the others began organizing recovery efforts. "I don't know how to thank you." Lurch placed a massive hand on Harry's shoulder, his usually impassive face softening almost imperceptibly. "Family," he said, the word coming easier now with practice. Family, Harry agreed, his throat tight with emotion. I should introduce you to the rest of them. And as the sun rose over Hogwarts, Harry led Lurch into the Great Hall, where the survivors of the Battle of Hogwarts were gathering to begin the process of healing and rebuilding. There would be time later for explanations and plans, for grief and celebration. For now, it was enough that they had survived, that they had won, and that Harry had found family in the most unexpected of places. In the days to come, stories would spread throughout the wizarding world of the Battle of Hogwarts, of Harry Potter and his mysterious, indestructible ally who had driven the Death Eaters to flight and helped defeat Voldemort himself. Some would call Lurch a monster, others a miracle. But to those who had been there, who had seen him fight not with cruelty but with steady, protective purpose, he was simply family. And in the Adams mansion across the ocean, Gomez and Morticia would receive a letter from their distant relative, inviting them to visit when the dust had settled, to meet Harry's other family, the one he had found at Hogwarts, and to celebrate together the peace they had all helped create. For the first time in his life, Harry Potter had more family than he knew what to do with. And though some of them were decidedly strange, whether magical or macabre or both, they were his. And that, more than defeating Voldemort, more than saving the wizarding world, was the victory that mattered most. Chapter 3, The final stand. Dawn broke over Hogwarts, painting the battle-scarred grounds in soft gold light. Harry stood at a shattered window in the Great Hall, watching as Ministry officials rounded up the last of the surrendering Death Eaters. Beside him, Lurch loomed silently, his massive frame casting a long shadow across the floor. Still can't believe it's over, Ron said, joining them with 3 steaming mugs of tea. Keep expecting to wake up in that bloody tent somewhere. I know what you mean, Harry replied, accepting the tea gratefully. He offered the 3rd mug to Lurch, who took it between 2 massive fingers with surprising delicacy. 24 hours ago we were with the Adamses in America. Now Voldemort's dead and the war's over. And it's all thanks to your creepy butler cousin, Ron grinned, raising his mug in Lurch's direction. Never thought I'd be this happy to see someone's head get popped like a grape. Ron! Hermione scolded, appearing at his elbow. She looked exhausted, her hair wilder than usual and smudges of dirt and blood on her face. She'd spent the night helping Madame Pomfrey with the wounded. That's hardly appropriate. What? It's not like I'm saying it to someone who'd be upset. Lurch understands, don't you, mate? Lurch made a noncommittal groan and sipped his tea, his expression as impassive as ever. See? He's fine with it, Ron insisted. Besides, after what the Death Eaters did, they deserved worse. Harry couldn't argue with that. The Battle of Hogwarts had been brutal. Though Lurch's intervention had prevented the castle from being overrun in the first assault, the second wave had still caused significant casualties before Voldemort's defeat. Fred Weasley had nearly died when a wall collapsed, would have died if Lurch hadn't been nearby to shield him from the worst of it. Lupin and Tonks had been cornered by Dolohov and Bellatrix but were saved by Neville and a group of DA members. Others hadn't been so lucky. The Ministry's still in chaos, Hermione reported, changing the subject. Kingsley's taken temporary control as acting minister, but he says at least a quarter of the employees were under the Imperius curse, and they're still trying to figure out who was cursed versus who was actually loyal to Voldemort. Better them than us, Harry sighed. I've had enough of politics to last a lifetime. Well, you'd better prepare yourself, Hermione warned. Kingsley wants to speak with you. And Lurch. Apparently, the Minister of Magic wants a formal introduction to the... How did he put it? The extraordinary individual who assisted in Voldemort's defeat. Ron snorted. Extraordinary's one word for him. He glanced up at Lurch. No offense, mate. Lurch made another sound that might have been amusement. I'll talk to Kingsley later, Harry decided. Right now, I need to check on the others. The Great Hall had been transformed into a combination hospital ward and command center. House tables pushed against the walls held supplies and food for the defenders. Makeshift beds filled the central space where Madame Pomfrey and volunteers tended to the injured. In one corner, Professor McGonagall conferred with other Order members, planning the castle's defense in case any remaining Death Eaters attempted a counterattack. They made their way through the crowded hall, stopping to speak with friends and check on the wounded. Everywhere they went, conversations stopped as people stared at Lurch with mixtures of awe, gratitude, and lingering fear. "Hey, it's the big guy," George called from a bed where he sat beside Fred, whose head was heavily bandaged. "Come over here, you beautiful monster." "George," Mrs. Weasley admonished, though without much heat. She was sitting on Fred's other side, her eyes red from crying but her face relaxed with relief that both twins had survived. Harry led Lurch over to the Weasley family gathering. Arthur stood and extended his hand first to Harry, then, after only a moment's hesitation, to Lurch. "We owe you our son's life," he said simply. "Thank you." Lurch accepted the handshake with a solemn nod. "Bill tells us you're related to Harry somehow?" Mrs. Weasley asked, looking between them curiously. "Sort of," Harry explained. "His family, the Addams family, they're distant relatives on my mother's side. I only found out about them a few days ago." "And they just sent their butler to help you fight a war?" George asked, incredulous. "They offered to come themselves," Harry admitted with a small smile. "Gomez, that's the father, was pretty keen on joining the fight. But he's apparently banned from Britain until 2057. "Why?" Ron asked, suddenly curious. "Something about the Tower of London and the Queen's corgis," Harry replied. He wouldn't elaborate. Fred, despite his injuries, perked up. "I need to meet this family," he declared. "Anyone banned from Britain for something involving royal dogs is my kind of people." "You will," Harry promised. "Once things settle down a bit, I'm going to invite them for a proper visit." Ginny, who had been silent until now, studying Lurch with open curiosity, finally spoke up. "So what exactly is he?" she asked bluntly. "I mean, no offense, but he's not exactly normal, is he?" "Ginny!" Mrs. Weasley exclaimed. "It's a fair question," Harry said quickly. "And honestly, I'm not entirely sure. The Addamses weren't very specific about Lurch's origins. Just that he's been with their family for generations and he's nearly indestructible. And immune to magic," Ron added eagerly. "You should have seen it, stunning spells, impediment jinxes, even killing curses just bounce right off him." "That's impossible," Percy interjected, joining the conversation. He'd arrived with Ministry reinforcements shortly after Voldemort's death and had been working with Kingsley since. "Nothing is completely immune to magic." Lurch made a dismissive noise, clearly having heard this argument before. "See for yourself," Ron challenged. "Try a harmless spell on him." Percy hesitated, glancing at Harry, who nodded permission. With a skeptical expression, Percy drew his wand and pointed it at Lurch. "Wingardium Leviosa." Nothing happened. Lurch remained firmly planted on the ground, not even a flutter of his suit jacket indicating the spell had any effect. "Remarkable," Percy murmured, his bureaucratic stiffness momentarily replaced by genuine wonder. "The magical resistance implications alone are. I mean, the Department of Mysteries would." "No," Harry said firmly. "Lurch isn't a research subject. He's a person. And he's family." Lurch placed a massive hand on Harry's shoulder, the gesture oddly paternal. Percy flushed. "Of course, I didn't mean to imply, that is, I was merely." He cleared his throat. "The minister would still like to speak with you both when you have a moment." "Later," Harry promised again. "We're still checking on everyone." As they continued through the great hall, Harry noticed Snape sitting alone in a corner, no longer bound but clearly still under guard. Aurors positioned nearby watched him warily. Despite his role in Dumbledore's plan being revealed, years of hatred and suspicion weren't easily overcome. "Should we Hermione gestured toward the former headmaster. Harry hesitated. His feelings about Snape remained complicated. The man had loved his mother, had protected Harry in his own harsh way for years, had been Dumbledore's most trusted agent, and yet, he'd also been cruel, vindictive, and had made Harry's school years miserable. Yeah, he decided finally. We should. Snape looked up as they approached, his face as unreadable as ever. Potter, he acknowledged, then nodded slightly to Ron and Hermione before his black eyes settled on Lurch. Your relative performed admirably. Dumbledore would have been impressed. Coming from Snape, this was practically effusive praise. Harry wasn't quite sure how to respond. Your information about the Horcrux in my scar was correct, he said finally. Thank you. Snape's mouth thinned into what might have been a bitter smile. Don't mistake necessity for kindness, Potter. I did what was required, nothing more. Still, Harry pressed, without you, we might not have succeeded. Indeed, Snape conceded. Though I believe your butler friend deserves the lion's share of the credit. He studied Lurch with professional interest. I've spent decades studying magical creatures and magical resistance. I've never encountered anything quite like him. Lurch straightened his tie modestly. What happens to you now? Hermione asked Snape. That remains to be determined, Snape replied coolly. The minister has indicated that my actions as a double agent will be taken into consideration, but there are still complications. Dumbledore's death, Harry guessed. Snape inclined his head slightly. Among other things. The legal system tends to take a dim view of unforgivable curses, regardless of the circumstances. I'll speak to Kingsley, Harry promised impulsively. Tell him everything you did. The pensive memories, keep them, Snape interrupted sharply. Those were for you alone, Potter. I have no desire to have my personal recollections paraded before the Wizengamot. Harry nodded, understanding. Some things were too private, too painful to share. Still, you deserve recognition for what you did. For your loyalty to Dumbledore. To my mother. Something flickered in Snape's eyes, pain, perhaps, or simply exhaustion. If you wish to do something for me, Potter, then succeed where I failed. Live. Build something worth protecting. His gaze shifted to Lurch. And keep your unusual family close. They seem effective. Before Harry could respond, a commotion at the entrance to the Great Hall drew everyone's attention. Kingsley Shacklebolt was striding toward them, his purple robes torn and singed but his presence as commanding as ever. Harry, he greeted, then looked up, way up, at Lurch. And you must be the remarkable individual I've been hearing about. The one immune to magic. Lurch bowed formally. Minister, Harry acknowledged. This is Lurch. He's family. So I've heard, Kingsley said, a hint of amusement in his deep voice. Your family has my profound gratitude, Harry. All of Wizarding Britain owes you a debt that can never be repaid. Harry shifted uncomfortably. I had a lot of help. Indeed you did, Kingsley agreed, glancing significantly at Lurch. That's partly why I'm here. The remaining Death Eaters we've captured are being surprisingly forthcoming with information, particularly about Voldemort's hidden strongholds and the location of the Lestrange Vault in Gringotts. They're cooperating? Hermione asked, surprised. After witnessing their master's defeat at the hands, quite literally, of your friend here. Kingsley raised an eyebrow. They're practically falling over themselves to help. Fear is a powerful motivator, and the thought that we might introduce them to Lurch has made them remarkably compliant. Harry glanced at Lurch, who somehow managed to look even more intimidating despite his expression not changing at all. We've located Hufflepuff's cup, Kingsley continued. A team is retrieving it from Gringotts as we speak. Once it's destroyed, all of Voldemort's Horcruxes will be gone. It's really over then, Harry said quietly, the weight of it finally sinking in. Not quite, Kingsley cautioned. There are still Death Eaters at large, still sympathizers in positions of power. The rebuilding process will take time. He hesitated, then added, which brings me to my other reason for seeking you out. The Ministry, what's left of it, needs symbols of hope and unity. Heroes that people can rally behind. Harry immediately tensed. I'm not interested in being the Ministry's poster boy, Kingsley. I understand, Kingsley said, raising a placating hand. And I wouldn't ask that of you. But there will be ceremonies, memorials for the fallen, celebrations of victory. Your presence, both of you, he nodded to include Lurch, would mean a great deal to people. Before Harry could respond, Lurch made a surprisingly expressive gesture, a sort of half-bow combined with a hand movement that somehow clearly conveyed, that's his decision, not mine. I'll think about it, Harry conceded. But right now, there are more important things to do. People to help. A castle to rebuild. Kingsley smiled. I expected nothing less. When you're ready to talk more, you know where to find me. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing, Harry. There have already been inquiries from the Daily Prophet about your unusual ally. Rita Skeeter is particularly interested in an exclusive interview. Absolutely not, Harry said firmly. I thought as much, Kingsley chuckled. I'll have someone run interference. In the meantime, perhaps consider how you want to introduce your extended family to Wizarding Britain. I suspect they'll cause quite a sensation. After Kingsley departed, Harry turned to his friends. He's right about one thing, we should tell people about the Adamses before the rumors get out of control. We could invite them here, Hermione suggested. Once things are a bit more settled. Let people meet them in person. Are you sure that's a good idea? Ron asked skeptically. I mean, from what you've told us, they're a bit intense. Harry couldn't help but laugh. That's one way of putting it. But they're good people. Strange, definitely, but good. If they're anything like Lurch, I think they'll fit right in at Hogwarts, Hermione said with a smile. This place has always welcomed the unusual. As if on cue, Lurch produced a small, ornate candle from an inner pocket of his suit jacket. He held it out to Harry questioningly. The communication candle, Harry realized. Grandmama said to light it if we needed to contact them. He looked around the crowded Great Hall. Maybe we should wait until, but Lurch had already struck a match, lighting the black candle with a precise movement. The flame burned an unnatural purple, sending spirals of oddly scented smoke toward the enchanted ceiling. Or we could do it now, Harry sighed. The smoke began to coalesce, forming shapes in the air above them. Students and teachers backed away, wands raised cautiously as the purple cloud expanded and thickened. Then, with a sound like distant thunder, the smoke parted to reveal Morticia Adams's elegant face, floating in midair like a ghostly projection. Harry, darling, she exclaimed, her voice echoing strangely. Lurch. How delightful to hear from you so soon. Is everyone still alive? Did you defeat that tedious Dark Lord? Conversations throughout the Great Hall stopped as everyone stared at the apparition. Harry cleared his throat. Hello, Cousin Morticia. Yes, Voldemort's dead. Lurch was incredible, he practically won the battle single-handedly. Marvelous. Morticia beamed. Gomez will be so pleased. He's been pacing the dungeons for hours, fretting about missing all the excitement. Her floating face turned slightly. Lurch, dear, you're not hurt, are you? You look a bit peaky. Lurch groaned reassuringly. That's a relief, Morticia said. And you, Harry? All your limbs still attached? No permanent disfigurements? Pity, but I suppose good health is its own reward. Harry bit back a smile. I'm fine, thanks. We all are, mostly. There were some injuries, but nothing too serious. How disappointing for you, Morticia sighed sympathetically. After such build-up, one hopes for at least a few dramatic scars to show for one's efforts. Ron made a choking sound behind Harry. Actually, Harry continued, ignoring his friend, I was hoping to invite you all to visit. Now that the war's over, I'd like you to meet my friends. And I'd like them to meet you. Morticia's face lit up with genuine delight. We'd be enchanted, darling. We've been dying to see Hogwarts for ages. Literally dying. Grandmama has a potion that simulates death quite convincingly. The children will be thrilled. Great, Harry said, slightly alarmed at the death potion reference but pressing on. Maybe in a few days. Once things are a bit more settled here. Perfect, Morticia agreed. That will give Wednesday time to pack her favorite torture devices. She's been so looking forward to showing them to your British friends. Harry glanced around at the horrified faces of his schoolmates and teachers. Maybe tell Wednesday to pack light, he suggested diplomatically. And perhaps leave the, torture devices at home. Just for this first visit. Morticia looked disappointed but nodded. If you insist, darling. Though she'll be crushed. She's been working on a delightful little thumbscrew modification. Next time, Harry promised, wondering what he was getting himself into. We'll arrange a portkey for you in a few days. Splendid. We'll see you soon, darling. Lurch, do take care of our boy. With a final elegant wave, Morticia's face dissolved back into purple smoke, which quickly dissipated. A stunned silence filled the great hall. Then, bloody hell, someone whispered loudly. Potter's relatives are even weirder than he is. The tension broke as laughter rippled through the crowd. Harry grinned sheepishly at his friends. I did warn you they were a bit different. Torture devices? Hermione asked faintly. Wednesday's harmless, Harry assured her. Mostly. She's just, enthusiastic about historical methods of pain infliction. Sounds like she'd get along great with Filch, Ron snorted. The mention of the caretaker reminded Harry of all the work that lay ahead. Hogwarts had suffered significant damage during the battle. Towers had collapsed, walls were breached, and magical residue from hundreds of spells made some areas dangerous to enter. We should help with the cleanup, he decided. Before the Adamses arrive, we need to get this place at least partially repaired. For the next 3 days, Harry, his friends, and Lurch worked alongside teachers, students, and volunteers to begin restoring Hogwarts. The castle itself helped in strange ways. Some corridors seemed to repair themselves overnight, while others stubbornly remained damaged despite magical intervention. Lurch proved invaluable in the reconstruction efforts. His immunity to magic meant he could safely enter areas saturated with residual spell damage. His enormous strength allowed him to move fallen stones and beams that would have required multiple wizards to levitate. And his silent, steady presence seemed to comfort everyone around him, a reminder of the unconventional ally who had helped turn the tide of battle. On the morning of the 4th day after Voldemort's defeat, Harry stood at the repaired front gates of Hogwarts, watching as a portkey delivery owl approached. Beside him, Lurch had taken extra care with his appearance, his suit freshly pressed, his tie immaculate. Nervous? Harry asked, noticing the butler adjusting his cuffs for the 3rd time. Lurch made a noncommittal noise. Me too, Harry admitted. I hope they don't completely terrify everyone. The owl dropped a small package at their feet, an old baseball, the same portkey that had first taken Harry to America. A note attached indicated it would activate as a return portkey at precisely 9 a.m. Harry checked his watch. 3 minutes. Ron, Hermione, and Neville joined them at the gates. They'd volunteered to be part of the welcoming committee, though Hermione had insisted on reading everything the Hogwarts library had on alternative magical cultures, in preparation. Just remember, Harry reminded them, they're a bit intense, but they mean well. Mostly. And try not to react too strongly to anything they say or do. They enjoy shocking people. We faced Voldemort, Ron said confidently. How bad can they be? Harry and Lurch exchanged a look. Oh, Hermione said quietly. That bad? Before Harry could respond, the baseball began to glow blue. Seconds later, with a whoosh of displaced air, the Addams family appeared, all of them, along with what appeared to be several large trunks and a disembodied hand scurrying alongside their luggage. Gomez, resplendent in a pinstriped suit, was the first to recover from the journey. Harry, my boy, he exclaimed, throwing his arms wide. Magnificent. Simply magnificent. Defeating a Dark Lord, overthrowing a corrupt government, bringing glory to the family name. He grabbed Harry in an enthusiastic hug that nearly lifted him off his feet. Morticia glided forward next, elegant as ever in a floor-length black dress that seemed to move like shadows around her. Darling, she greeted Harry, kissing both his cheeks. You look wonderful. Not nearly as haunted as when we last saw you. Pity. Wednesday and Pugsley, the children, were already examining Hogwarts with critical eyes. It's adequately gloomy, Wednesday approved. Though it could use more gargoyles. And a moat, Pugsley added. With something carnivorous in it. Uncle Fester, the bald, wild-eyed man Harry remembered from the mansion, was spinning in circles, taking in the grounds. Love what you've done with the battlefield. He called, pointing to the still visible scorch marks from the fighting. Very apocalyptic. Any unexploded magical ordnance I could play with? Grandmama shuffled forward, her wild grey hair even more untamed than Harry remembered. She peered up at Hogwarts with knowing eyes. Good bones, she declared. Ancient magic. Temperamental but strong. Like my second husband. Thing, the disembodied hand, scurried up to perch on Harry's shoulder in what seemed like a friendly greeting. Harry's friend stared in stunned silence. Even Neville, who had faced Nagini with the sword of Gryffindor, looked slightly pale. Everyone, Harry said, trying to maintain his composure, these are my American relatives, the Addams family. Gomez, Morticia, Wednesday, Pugsley, Uncle Fester, Grandmama, and Thing. And you've already met Lurch. Lurch bowed formally to his employers, who greeted him with genuine affection. Lurch, old man. Gomez clapped the butler on the arm. Splendid work. Using a dark wizard's spine as a back-scratcher, inspired improvisation. Harry winced. He didn't actually, family, Lurch interrupted with surprising clarity, gesturing to Harry's friends. Of course, Morticia said smoothly. Harry's chosen family. How delightful to meet you all. Hermione was the first to recover. She stepped forward and offered her hand to Morticia. I'm Hermione Granger. Thank you so much for helping Harry when we needed it most. Think nothing of it, darling, Morticia replied, taking Hermione's hand in her cool grip. Family is family, whether bound by blood or by surviving deadly peril together. Ron and Neville introduced themselves next, Ron still looking slightly shell-shocked but making a valiant effort to appear normal. You have a lovely home, Neville said politely, gesturing toward Hogwarts. I mean, it's not my home, but it's a school, actually. A school? Gomez looked delighted. How perfectly dreadful. All those young minds to corrupt, I mean cultivate. We homeschooled our children, Morticia explained. The local educational system wasn't quite prepared for Wednesday's science projects. The frog dissection incident was completely misunderstood, Wednesday said flatly. He was already dead. Mostly. Harry saw Neville take an instinctive step back and decided it was time to move things along. Why don't we go inside? Professor McGonagall's waiting to meet you, and there's a small reception planned in the Great Hall. As they walked toward the castle, Gomez fell into step beside Harry. So, my boy, tell me everything. The battle, the victory, the vanquishing of your enemies. Spare no gruesome detail. Harry gave an abbreviated account of the Battle of Hogwarts as they walked, emphasizing Lurch's crucial role and downplaying the more disturbing aspects. By the time they reached the entrance hall, the Adamses were looking both impressed and slightly disappointed at the relative lack of carnage in Harry's telling. "And you say he just died?" Fester asked incredulously. "No explosion. No melting. No dramatic transformation into a swarm of flesh-eating insects." No," Harry admitted. "Just died. When Lurch, you know." He made a vague strangling gesture. "How anticlimactic," Morticia sighed. "Though I suppose there's a certain elegant simplicity to it. The best deaths are often the quietest," Grandmama nodded sagely. "Like my fourth husband. Or was it my fifth? The one with the peculiar fondness for poisonous toadstools." They entered the great hall to find it transformed. The damage from the battle had been mostly repaired, and the house tables were back in place, though arranged differently to create a more open, communal space. Professor McGonagall stood waiting with several other teachers and order members, all looking slightly nervous but determined to be welcoming. Minerva McGonagall, the headmistress, introduced herself, stepping forward to greet the Adamses. "Welcome to Hogwarts. We owe your family, and especially your butler, an immeasurable debt of gratitude." "Charmed," Gomez declared, pumping her hand enthusiastically. "Absolutely charmed. What a magnificent castle you have. The Gothic arches, the gloomy corridors, the palpable sense of centuries of magical experimentation gone horribly wrong, it's exquisite." McGonagall blinked but recovered admirably. "Thank you, Mr. Adams. We're quite fond of it ourselves." Introductions continued as the Adams family met the Hogwarts staff and key order members. Harry watched with a mixture of amusement and anxiety as his two worlds collided. Morticia and Professor Sprout fell into an intense discussion about carnivorous plants. Gomez and Arthur Weasley bonded over their shared fascination with Muggle gadgets, though Gomez's interest seemed to focus primarily on items that could potentially explode. Grandmama cornered Professor Slughorn to debate potion ingredients, while Wednesday and Pugsley peppered Hagrid with questions about the most dangerous creatures in the Forbidden Forest. "They're actually fitting in better than I expected," Hermione observed, joining Harry at the refreshment table. "Give it time," Harry replied. "Uncle Fester hasn't started setting himself on fire yet." As if on cue, a small explosion came from across the room, followed by delighted cackling. Fester had apparently discovered the magical properties of Weasley's wildfire whiz-bangs and was now surrounded by miniature dragons made of sparks. "You were saying?" Ron grinned, appearing at Harry's other side. Despite the occasional alarming incident, Pugsley attempting to sample a potion that made the drinker temporarily invisible, Wednesday asking nearly headless Nick detailed questions about the exact sensation of partial decapitation, things startling Professor Flitwick by appearing unexpectedly on his shoulder, the reception went surprisingly well. The Addams family's genuine warmth and interest, however oddly expressed, won over even the most skeptical Hogwarts residents. After the initial meet and greet, Harry took his American relatives on a tour of the castle. Their reactions were enthusiastic, to say the least. "You have a dungeon?" Gomez exclaimed when Harry mentioned potions class. "Marvelous. Are there chains? Implements of torture? Ancient bloodstains from forgotten prisoners?" "It's a classroom," Harry explained. "Though Snape did make it feel like torture sometimes." "This moving staircase is delightful," Morticia commented as they navigated the main stairwell. "So unpredictable. One could fall to their death at any moment. How thrilling for the students." "There are safety charms," Hermione hastily explained. "What a pity," Morticia sighed. The tour ended at the Room of Requirement, which Harry had asked to provide a comfortable space for them all to talk more privately. "A room that becomes whatever you need?" Grandmama looked impressed. "Reminds me of my second honeymoon suite. Or was it my third? The one that kept changing depending on which husband was visiting." Once they were all settled in comfortable chairs, Lurch standing stoically behind Harry's seat, Harry finally asked the question that had been on his mind since they arrived. How much trouble did you have getting a port key to Britain? With Gomez being banned and all? Gomez chuckled, puffing on a cigar that had appeared in his hand. Trifling inconvenience, my boy. A few well-placed bribes, a minor case of mistaken identity, and a technically not illegal blood oath later, and voila. International port key. Though we did have to promise not to go within 50 miles of Buckingham Palace, Morticia added. Such a shame. The Queen has such lovely corgis. Harry decided it was better not to ask for details. We bring gifts. Pugsley announced suddenly, diving into one of the trunks they'd brought. He emerged with an assortment of peculiar objects that he began distributing. For you, he said, handing Hermione what appeared to be a book bound in some sort of scaly leather. Great Aunt Calpurnia's Grimoire. Advanced hexes and curses from the 1700s. Some of them make your enemy's eyeballs explode. Hermione accepted the book with a mixture of academic fascination and horror. Thank you, she managed. It's educational. Ron received a dagger with an unsettlingly curved blade. Uncle Vlad's throwing knife, Pugsley explained. It always returns to the thrower. Usually point first, so you have to be quick. Neville was given a small potted plant with teeth. Man-eating begonia, Wednesday told him flatly. Miniaturized. It only eats fingertips. The gift-giving continued, each present more alarming than the last. Harry watched as his friends reacted with forced smiles and genuine confusion to the Addams family's idea of appropriate tokens of friendship. And for you, Harry, Morticia said finally, producing a small, ornate box. Something special. A family heirloom. Harry opened the box carefully to find an old-fashioned pocket watch made of tarnished silver. Intricate engravings covered its surface, symbols he didn't recognize but that seemed to shift slightly when he wasn't looking directly at them. It belonged to your grandmother's cousin, Morticia explained. The last Evans to visit our home before your mother. It's enchanted, of course. It not only tells the time but also how much of it the viewer has left. You mean, when I'm going to die? Harry asked, startled. Precisely. Gomez beamed. Tremendously useful for planning one's schedule. No sense starting a 7-year project if you've only got 6 years to live, eh? Harry stared at the watch, not sure whether to be touched or disturbed. Thank you, he said finally. It's thoughtful. Of course, it's not entirely accurate, Grandmama added cheerfully. More of a general estimate. It told Cousin Fungus he had 3 days to live, and he lasted nearly a week. Sheer spite, mostly. The point is, Morticia said, her voice softening, it's a connection to your mother's family. Your family. A reminder that you're not alone in this world, Harry. You have us now. Harry felt a lump form in his throat. Beneath all the macabre humor and bizarre behavior, the Addams family had given him something he'd always longed for, a sense of belonging, of family history, of roots that extended beyond the tragedy of his parents' deaths. I don't know how to thank you, he said honestly. Not just for the watch, but for sending Lurch. For helping us when we needed it most. Family, Lurch said simply, placing a massive hand on Harry's shoulder. Exactly so, Gomez nodded vigorously. Addamses stand together, whether against dark lords, government persecution, angry villagers with torches and pitchforks, or particularly persistent tax collectors. Though we must admit, Morticia added with a small smile, we're particularly proud of how Lurch handled your Dark Lord situation. It's not often he gets to fully express himself professionally. Lurch straightened his tie modestly. Will you stay? Harry asked Lurch directly. After your family returns to America? You could. I mean, if you wanted to. What Harry's trying to say, Hermione interrupted gently, is that you'd be welcome to stay at Hogwarts. Or with any of us, really. You've become part of our family too. Lurch looked genuinely moved by the offer, but shook his head slowly. "Atoms need me," he explained, the words coming more easily now with practice. "Of course they do," Harry agreed quickly. "I just thought." "But visits," Lurch continued, surprising them all with his longest speech yet. "We'll come back. For holidays. For you." Morticia beamed proudly at her butler. "Lurch has been practicing his conversational skills. He's become quite the chatterbox since meeting you, Harry. And you're all welcome to visit us too, of course," Gomez added enthusiastically. "The whole lot of you. We'll have a proper Adams celebration, bats, swamp creatures, explosive entertainment, the works." Ron looked both terrified and intrigued by this prospect. "Sounds brilliant," he said weakly. As the conversation continued, flowing from plans for future visits to increasingly outlandish stories of Adam's family adventures, Harry felt a sense of peace settle over him. With Voldemort gone and the wizarding world beginning to rebuild, he could finally look forward to a future that included both his chosen family, the friends who had stood by him through everything, and his newfound relatives, strange as they might be. Later that evening, as the welcome feast for the Addams family was winding down in the Great Hall, Harry found himself standing on the partially repaired astronomy tower, looking out over the Hogwarts grounds. The setting sun painted the scene in warm gold light, softening the visible scars of battle. Heavy footsteps behind him announced Lurch's arrival. The butler joined him at the railing, his massive form somehow comforting rather than imposing now. "Thinking," Lurch observed quietly. Harry nodded. "About everything that's happened. How differently it could have gone without you. Without your family." Lurch made a dismissive noise, as if to say it was nothing. "No, really," Harry insisted. "If I hadn't had those dreams about the Addams mansion, if you hadn't come with us, so many more people would have died. Voldemort might have won." "Family," Lurch said, as if that explained everything. "And in a way, it did. You know," Harry said after a comfortable silence, "I spent my whole life wishing for family. When I found out I was a wizard, I thought I'd found where I belonged. Then I met Ron and Hermione and the Weasleys, and I realized family isn't just about blood." Lurch nodded approvingly. "But finding the Addamses, finding you, showed me something else," Harry continued. "That family can be weird and unexpected and completely mad, and still be exactly what you need." Lurch's expression softened, and he placed a massive hand on Harry's shoulder. "Hogwarts," Lurch said, gesturing at the castle around them. "Adam's house." He gestured in the general direction of America. "Both home. For you." "Yeah," Harry agreed, feeling the truth of it deep in his bones. "Both home." Below them, on the grounds, they could see Gomez enthusiastically fencing with nearly headless Nick, who seemed delighted to have a corporeal partner who didn't mind his occasionally detaching head, while Morticia and Professor Sprout examined some of the more dangerous plants from the greenhouses. Wednesday and Pugsley appeared to be teaching a group of fascinated first-years some kind of game involving what looked suspiciously like small explosives, while Grandmama and Professor McGonagall shared a pot of tea, seemingly deep in conversation. "Fitting in," Lurch observed. Harry laughed. "In their own way, yeah. I'm not sure Hogwarts will ever be the same." "Better," Lurch suggested. "Different," Harry agreed. "But maybe better too." As darkness fell over Hogwarts, Harry and Lurch remained on the tower, watching the stars appear one by one. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, rebuilding efforts, ministry business, decisions about the future. The Addams family would return to America, taking Lurch with them, but Harry knew now that distance couldn't truly separate family. He had faced his darkest fears, confronted death itself, and emerged not just victorious but surrounded by more love and belonging than he'd ever dared hope for. His family had expanded in the most unexpected way possible, crossing oceans and embracing differences that went far beyond magical ability. And if that family happened to include a nearly indestructible butler with a penchant for terrifying dark wizards, well, that was just another example of how wonderfully strange life could be. "You know," Harry said as they finally turned to head back inside, "I think I might actually miss the chaos when you all leave." Lurch's answering groan somehow managed to convey both amusement and a clear message: "This isn't goodbye. It's just the beginning." Harry smiled, knowing he was right. The Battle of Hogwarts had ended one chapter of his life, but with his expanded family, both magical and macabre, the next promised to be even more extraordinary. And he couldn't wait to see what came next. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.